The young Terran was mocked. Then the deadliest hunter called him brother. The starport of Arcturus 9 was alive with noise, lights, and motion. Ships of every shape and size hummed and glowed, landing and taking off like fireflies in the dark. Travelers of countless species moved along the corridors, their voices a mix of languages and clicks and whistles. In this busy chaos, a young Terran named Kale felt very small. Kale was short for his age, and his limbs were thin. His uniform hung loosely on him, making him look even smaller. But inside him burned a quiet determination. He wanted, more than anything, to prove that a human could survive, and even thrive, among the best warriors in the galaxy. The other recruits laughed at him the moment he arrived. Tall, muscular aliens towered over him. Some had scales that shimmered like molten metal. Others had long, powerful limbs and sharp claws, even if they were kept sheathed. The Terrans were the smallest of all the recruits, and Kale, being the youngest, became an easy target. "Hey, little Terran," one of the recruits sneered, a tall, four-armed alien named Grix. "Did your mommy pack your lunch for you, or are you going to borrow someone else's today?" Kale ignored him and kept walking, his jaw tight. He had heard these kinds of words before, back on Earth. He knew being small didn't mean being weak. But it was difficult not to feel the sting. The training hall was enormous, filled with glowing panels and holograms. Here, the recruits practiced combat and survival skills. Kale had trained for years on Earth, but the techniques used here were different, often dangerous, and usually designed for larger, stronger bodies. "Cadet Kale," barked a voice. A tall officer, humanoid but with bright orange skin and piercing violet eyes, called him over. "Today you will attempt the zero-gravity combat drill. Do your best. Don't embarrass yourself or us." Kale swallowed hard. His heart raced. The other recruits snickered under their breath, certain that he would fail. The drill began. Ka fielded a training blaster, a light weapon that fired harmless but rapid energy bolts. The arena was a dome of glowing panels, and the recruits floated inside using small grav chutes that gave them limited control. Kale's first maneuver was simple: push off from the wall and reach the other side. But he misjudged the angle, spinning wildly and bumping into the ceiling. The others laughed, and some cheered mockingly as if watching a comedy show. "Watch him flop like a fish," Grix shouted. Kale felt heat rush to his face. He tried again, focusing on his breathing. This time he moved more carefully, aiming for the floating targets that popped up in the arena. His shots hit a few, but too slowly. He was still behind everyone else. Then came the final exercise, combat simulation. Holographic enemies appeared, moving fast and unpredictable. The recruits had to take them down in pairs. Kale was paired with a hulking alien named Var, whose green scales reflected the neon light. "Don't slow me down, little Terran," Var grunted. Kale clenched his jaw. The simulation began. Kale's first instinct was to hide behind a floating crate, hoping to get his bearings. Var rushed ahead, blasting enemies without hesitation. Kale tried to follow, but the holograms moved faster than he expected. One of them attacked him, and he stumbled, floating uncontrollably and spinning into the wall. Laughter erupted again. Even some of the instructors smiled faintly, not with pride but with amusement. Kale's face burned. He wanted to sink through the floor and disappear. He kept trying. Each failure made his hands shake, but he refused to give up. Then, unexpectedly, he noticed a pattern in the hologram's movements. They weren't completely random. They followed small signals, tiny habits. Kale started predicting them, dodging and aiming in ways no one else seemed to notice. But it was too late for him to catch up in the scoring. When the drill ended, Kale floated in exhaustion, his uniform torn and his blaster scratched. Var looked at him with something like pity. "Maybe next time, Terran," he said. Grix laughed again. Kale wanted to cry, but he clenched his fists instead. He had failed, yes, but he had noticed something no one else had. And that small spark of recognition gave him a strange kind of hope. Unbeknownst to everyone in the hall, someone else had been watching. Far above, in the observation decks usually reserved for high-ranking officers, a figure leaned over the glass. Rithar, the deadliest hunter in the Orion expanse, observed Kale. He was enormous, his armor dark and sleek, with weapons strapped across his back. He had hunted creatures that no one else would dare face, from the desert moons of Draxia to the black jungles of Korath. Yet here he was, studying a small Terran who had just failed spectacularly. Rithar's eyes narrowed. He noticed something in Kale's movements, a hesitation, yes, but also a precision, a small cleverness that the others lacked. The way Kale adjusted his aim in mid-spin, the way he predicted the hologram patterns, it was subtle but it showed potential. This one might be interesting, Rithar muttered to himself. Kale didn't know it yet, but his life was about to change. After the drill, recruits went to the mess hall. Kale sat alone, eating mechanically, still feeling the sting of embarrassment. Around him, Grix and Var bragged about their scores, loud and confident. "You humans are funny," Grix said. "All small, all fragile, and still thinking you can survive out here." Kale didn't reply. Words wouldn't help. Actions would. As he left the hall later, Kale wandered into the maintenance corridor, a quieter place where few went. He pressed his hand against the cold wall and breathed deeply. He remembered the stories his father had told him about humans on Earth. Explorers, thinkers, inventors, and fighters who overcame impossible odds. Humans were small in the universe, yes, but their minds and hearts were not. Kale clenched his fists. He would not remain the joke of Arcturus 9. He would prove that a Terran could survive, could fight, and could stand among the galaxy's greatest. At that moment, a low hum filled the corridor. A shadow moved along the wall. Kale froze. The shadow resolved into a figure, Rithar, stepping silently, his presence commanding even without words. "You are Kale," Rithar said. His voice was deep, calm, and carried an authority that made the small Terran straighten instinctively. Kale nodded, unsure whether to speak. "I watched you in the drill," Rithar continued. "You failed spectacularly, and yet I saw something others did not." "Tell me, Terran, are you afraid of trying again?" Kale's heart pounded. Who was this? Why was the deadliest hunter in the galaxy speaking to him? I want to do better," Kale said finally, his voice small but firm. Rithar's eyes glinted. "Good. Fear is a tool. Ignorance is an enemy, and failure is only the beginning." Kale didn't understand everything Rithar meant, but something inside him stirred. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he was not entirely alone in the galaxy. The hunter turned and walked away, leaving Kale staring after him, heart racing, mind spinning. The corridor felt suddenly too small, too ordinary. Kale had glimpsed something extraordinary, a path that could lead him to more than just survival. That night, Kale lay on his cot in the Terran dormitory, unable to sleep. He thought about the drill, the laughter, the humiliation, but also about the spark Rithar had seen. For the first time, he did not feel weak. He felt chosen in a strange, quiet way. Outside, the stars of the Orion expanse stretched endlessly. Kale imagined flying among them, facing challenges that seemed impossible, hunting or being hunted, growing stronger with each trial. He imagined standing tall, not as a small Terran, but as someone the galaxy would one day respect. And deep inside, a voice whispered, "Tomorrow you begin to change everything." The morning on Arcturus 9 began like any other, with ships lifting off and landing, merchants shouting and travelers hurrying across the docks. But for Kale, nothing felt normal. The words of Rithar, the deadliest hunter in the Orion expanse, echoed in his mind. Fear is a tool, ignorance is an enemy, and failure is only the beginning. Kale had spent the night thinking about what that could mean. He felt a mix of excitement and terror. The opportunity to prove himself was real, and it came from the most dangerous being he had ever known. At the training hall, Kale was waiting when a shadow fell over him. Rithar appeared, taller and wider than Kale remembered, his dark armor reflecting the sunlight streaming in through the massive windows. "Ready, Terran?" Rithar asked. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. Kale nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Yes, sir." "Good," Rithar said. "You will accompany me on a field mission, a real mission, not a simulation, and you will survive or learn why most cannot. The planet is Vera 5. Hazardous terrain, dangerous predators, and unpredictable storms. You will need every ounce of your mind and body." Kale's heart skipped a beat. He had read about Vera 5 in old mission logs. It was a world where only the strongest survived. Even the top recruits were rarely sent there. And yet, here he was, chosen. The shuttle ride was tense. Kale sat beside Rithar, who did not speak, but whose presence was overwhelming. The hunter's eyes scanned the stars and the approaching planet as if he were already seeing threats invisible to ordinary beings. Kale felt both awe and fear. "Why me?" Kale asked, finally breaking the silence. Rithar's gaze did not shift. "Because I see what others cannot. You have potential. Your failures are not weaknesses. They are lessons waiting to be learned. Out there you will learn quickly or you will not return." Kale swallowed. The words were terrifying, but they also ignited something inside him. He was not just a recruit anymore. He was a student of the deadliest hunter in the galaxy. The shuttle landed roughly on the rocky surface of Vera 5. The atmosphere was thin, filled with a faint orange haze. Winds whipped around them, carrying particles that stung the skin. The ground was uneven, dotted with jagged rocks and deep crevices. Rithar stepped off the shuttle first, moving with a grace and confidence that made Kale stumble slightly. The hunter's movements were smooth, deliberate, and perfectly balanced. "Keep up," Rithar said, and without waiting for an answer, he moved toward the interior of a jagged canyon. Kale ran to catch up, struggling to maintain his balance on the unstable ground. "Stay close," Rithar called over his shoulder. "Observe everything." As they moved deeper into the canyon, Kale began to notice small things. The way rocks were worn smooth in some areas, the patterns of shadows, the faint sounds that suggested movement, subtle hints of life around them. Rithar did not need to speak. His silence forced Kale to pay attention, to notice what he had ignored before. Suddenly, a loud screech echoed through the canyon. Kale froze. A creature, larger than a Terran's house, with sleek black scales and glowing red eyes, emerged from behind the rocks. Its long limbs ended in sharp claws and its teeth glinted in the dim light. Rithar moved without hesitation. He fired a series of energy bolts, each hitting with deadly precision. But the creature was fast, dodging and twisting, its movements unpredictable. Kale's first instinct was to run, but then he remembered Rithar's words, "Fear is a tool." He took a deep breath and observed the creature. It had a rhythm. It lunged after Rithar in a pattern. Kale noticed that each time it lunged, it left its left side slightly exposed. "Here," Kale shouted, pointing. Rithar glanced at him, raised an eyebrow and shifted slightly, allowing Kale to fire a precise shot at the exposed side. The creature screeched and retreated, not defeated but cautious. Rithar's eyes narrowed. "Good," he said. "You saw what I missed. Now remember this, surviving is about observation, not just strength." Kale's confidence grew, but the trials were only beginning. For hours they moved through the canyon, facing various hazards. Rockslides, toxic plants that released paralyzing spores, and smaller predators that moved in packs. Each time, Kale learned to anticipate danger, to act quickly, and to trust his instincts. Rithar remained mostly silent, only offering brief, precise advice. By the end of the first day, Kale was exhausted. His uniform was torn, his hands blistered, and every muscle in his body ached. But he also felt alive in a way he never had before. He had survived and he had learned. That night, they camped in a small cave. The wind howled outside, rattling loose stones and echoing through the canyon. Cale tried to sleep but found his mind racing. Rithar sat nearby, cleaning his weapons. "Do you know why I chose you?" he asked without looking up. Cale shook his head. "No, sir." "Because you think differently," Rithar said. "Others rely on strength, on size, on instinct alone. You rely on observation and strategy. That is rare. That is valuable. That is how humans survive." Cale felt a swell of pride. The hunter, who had faced the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, was praising him. The next day brought the greatest challenge yet. As they navigated a narrow canyon, the ground trembled. A massive predator, a Veran behemoth, emerged. It was enormous, taller than the canyon walls, with armored scales and multiple eyes that glowed faintly. Its roar shook the rocks, sending small boulders tumbling toward Cale and Rithar. "Move!" Rithar shouted, charging forward with a speed Cale did not expect from such a large figure. Cale followed, dodging falling rocks and leaping over crevices. He watched the behemoth carefully, noting the way it shifted its weight, how its eyes tracked them. Then he saw it, a small gap in the armor, right where one of its legs joined its body. "Now!" Cale shouted. He aimed his blaster at the weak point and fired. The energy bolt hit true and the creature faltered, stumbling. Rithar took advantage of the moment, delivering a precise strike that caused the behemoth to retreat. Cale could hardly believe it. He had helped defeat one of the deadliest predators of Vera 5. Rithar clapped him on the shoulder. "Well done, Terran. You are learning fast." But remember, survival is not just about one fight. It is about every choice, every observation, every moment. Never forget that. Cale nodded, breathing heavily, his heart racing. He realized that the fear he had felt on Arcturus 9, the humiliation from the drills, had prepared him for this. Every failure, every mistake had taught him something. As they set up camp again that night, Cale looked at the stars through the opening of the cave. They seemed closer here, almost within reach. He thought of Earth, of the people who had doubted him, and he felt a quiet determination. "I will survive," he whispered to himself, "and I will prove that humans are more than they think." Rithar, watching from across the fire, nodded slightly. The hunter did not speak, but Cale felt the unspoken approval. He was no longer just a small Terran who was mocked. He was becoming something more. The journey on Vera 5 was far from over. There would be more predators, more challenges, and more tests of both mind and body. But Cale no longer felt afraid. He had tasted success, even in small doses, and he knew that each day, each trial was forging him into a stronger, sharper version of himself. By the end of Part 2, Cale had changed. He was no longer merely a cadet to be laughed at. He was a survivor, a strategist, and perhaps, one day, a hunter in his own right. And the deadliest hunter in the galaxy had noticed. Cale did not yet know that his greatest challenge was still ahead, one that would test everything he had learned and push him to his limits. But he felt ready. For the first time, Cale believed he could face anything the galaxy could throw at him. The canyon of Vera 5 was alive with tension. Cale moved carefully, each step deliberate, following Rithar through the jagged rocks and shifting shadows. The sun was low, casting long streaks of orange and purple across the rocky terrain. Every sound, every whisper of wind, every creak of stone, felt amplified. Cale knew instinctively that the greatest challenge of this mission was approaching. Rithar did not speak much. The hunter's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for something Cale could not yet see. Cale kept his blaster ready, his senses heightened. He remembered every lesson from the past 2 days: observation, patience, and using intelligence over brute force. Suddenly the ground shook violently. Cale stumbled, catching himself just in time. Rocks tumbled down the canyon walls, and then he saw it, the colossal predator. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the behemoth they had faced before. Its dark, armored scales shimmered in the fading sunlight. Multiple eyes glowed like coals, scanning for movement. Its long limbs ended in curved, deadly claws, and its jaws were wide enough to swallow a small vehicle. The roar it let out shook the canyon, and the sound was enough to make Kale's knees quiver. But Kale did not run. He remembered Rithar's words, "Fear is a tool, observation is your weapon." Rithar stepped forward without hesitation. "Stay close, Terran. Watch carefully." Timing is everything. Kale followed, his eyes never leaving the predator. He noticed how it moved, heavy steps, but each footfall was precise. Its head tilted slightly when it focused on a target. Its tail flicked occasionally, almost like a counterbalance to its massive body. There was a rhythm, a pattern. Kale felt a surge of adrenaline. The predator lunged suddenly, faster than Kale expected. He barely dodged, rolling to the side and firing a blaster bolt that barely grazed its side. Rithar leapt with ease, firing multiple precise shots while keeping close to Kale. "Now!" Kale shouted. He had studied the creature's movements and found a weak point near one of its legs, just like he had with the smaller behemoth. He fired, hitting the joint. The predator stumbled, roaring in pain, and Kale saw the opening for Rithar to strike. Rithar moved like a shadow, delivering a precise blow that made the creature retreat a few steps. But it was not done. The predator roared again, turning toward them with renewed aggression. Its eyes glowed brighter, and it lunged, faster than before. Kale felt a rush of fear, but he focused. He had learned to trust his instincts and his observations. He dodged another attack and fired another bolt, aiming for the weak points he had identified. The creature faltered again. Rithar glanced at Kale, a hint of approval in his eyes. "Good, keep it up. Use its mistakes." The battle continued, tense and exhausting. Rocks fell around them, dust filled the canyon, and the predator's movements grew more unpredictable. Kale's arms ached from holding his blaster, but he refused to give up. Each successful shot and movement built his confidence. Finally, the predator grew weary. Its movement slowed slightly, and it hesitated between attacks. Kale saw the opening. "Now, Rithar!" he shouted. Rithar moved with lethal precision, striking the predator at its most vulnerable point. The creature let out a final roar before collapsing to the ground. Silence fell over the canyon, broken only by the sound of wind and Kale's heavy breathing. Kale looked at Rithar, his heart pounding. "We did it," he said, almost in disbelief. Rithar approached him, towering and imposing. But instead of the cold, unreadable expression he had shown before, his face softened slightly. He placed a massive hand on Kale's shoulder. "You fought well, Terran," Rithar said. "You observed, you acted, and you survived. That is more than most can do." Kale's chest swelled with pride. He had gone from being mocked, laughed at, and underestimated to standing beside the deadliest hunter in the galaxy, victorious. Rithar's eyes locked onto Kale's. "I have hunted many creatures, but few warriors have impressed me like you. You have the mind of a human and the heart of a hunter. From this day forward, you are no longer just a Terran cadet. You are my brother in the hunt." Kale felt a surge of emotion. The word brother carried weight he had never imagined. Respect, recognition, and acceptance, all from the most feared hunter in the galaxy. He nodded, words failing him. The two hunters stood together for a moment, looking at the fallen predator. The canyon was quiet, save for the occasional echo of shifting rocks. Kale felt a strange sense of calm and strength. Over the next few hours, they prepared the site. Rithar showed Kale how to examine the predator, how to gather samples safely, and how to navigate back to the shuttle without attracting other dangers. Kale followed every instruction carefully, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. As night fell, the stars of Vera 5 shone brightly, more brilliant than Kale had ever seen. He lay on the rocky ground, exhausted but exhilarated. The trials of the past days, the drills, the failures, the smaller predators, and now the colossal predator, had changed him. He was no longer the small, mocked Terran. He was a survivor, a thinker, and a hunter in his own right. Rithar sat nearby, sharpening his weapon silently. Kale watched him, thinking about the journey they had shared. The hunter had challenged him, guided him, and tested him in ways no one else could. Kale realized that the bond they now shared was stronger than fear or respect. It was trust forged in the heat of the hunt. "You have done well, Kale," Rithar said finally. "But remember, the galaxy is vast and challenges never end. You will face more dangers and each will test you in new ways, but I see now that you are ready." Kale nodded. "Thank you, Rithar, for everything." The hunter gave a rare, small smile. "Do not thank me yet. The real tests are ahead, but you have learned the most important lesson. To survive, you must trust yourself, think clearly, and act boldly." The following days were filled with preparation for their return to Arcturus 9. Kale moved with confidence, navigating the treacherous terrain of Vera 5 with skill. He noticed details he would have missed before, predicted minor hazards, and even guided Rithar through a few tricky passages. The hunter's nods of approval were subtle, but Kale noticed them and felt a quiet pride. By the time they reached the shuttle, Kale felt transformed. He was stronger, smarter, and more confident than ever before. The galaxy had mocked him, tested him, and tried to break him, but he had endured. And now he stood not only as a survivor but as a hunter, recognized by one of the greatest hunters in existence. As the shuttle lifted off, leaving Vera 5 behind, Kale looked out at the endless expanse of stars. He thought of the other recruits, the ones who had laughed at him, and he felt no bitterness. Their laughter was a distant memory. What mattered now was the path ahead, a path of courage, skill, and discovery. Rithar sat beside him, silent as always, but Kale knew that he had earned the hunter's respect. And for Kale, that was worth more than any praise from the world. The journey back to Arcturus 9 was calm, yet Kale's mind raced with possibilities. He imagined new missions, greater challenges, and the day when humans, small and underestimated, would stand proudly among the galaxy's greatest warriors. When they landed, the other recruits stared at him in astonishment. Kale did not boast. He simply stood tall, his back straight, his eyes clear. He no longer needed to prove himself with words. His actions had already spoken. Grix approached, the usual smirk on his face. "So little Terran survived your little adventure, huh?" Kale smiled faintly. "I did more than survive," he said calmly. "I learned, and I'll keep learning." Rithar's voice echoed beside him. "He has become a hunter just as I predicted. Remember that." The other recruits looked at Kale differently now, some with envy, others with respect. Kale had crossed the line from being mocked to being admired, and deep inside he knew this was only the beginning. That night, Kale stood on the observation deck, looking at the stars. He felt something he had never felt before, belonging, purpose, and the quiet confidence that he could face whatever the universe threw at him. Beside him, Rithar placed a hand on his shoulder. "Brother," he said again, and Kale finally understood the full weight of the word. It was more than respect. It was recognition, trust, and connection forged in fire and danger, and Kale knew, without a doubt, that he was ready for the adventures yet to come. The young Terran who had been mocked, laughed at, and underestimated was gone. In his place stood a hunter, a strategist, and a human who had proven that size, fear, or doubt could never define true strength. And somewhere in the vast expanse of stars, Kale knew the galaxy was watching, and perhaps, for the first time, wondering what a human could truly do. The hunt had ended, the bond had been forged, and a new chapter in Kale's life and in humanity's story was just beginning.